The north of England was a place of great harvest for John Wesley. He preached all across the north of England, in Lancashire, in the old Hepton-style chapel, and then in Yarm, in the old county of Yorkshire, and then regularly at Osmotherley. But it was at Newbiggin in Teesdale in 1759, in this small hamlet, in a chapel built essentially for those landless lead miners, that the oldest chapel in continuous use in the world was built, and it's a real gem.
Mary Rose, it's good to talk to you, and you've got in your hand here a Bible that takes us right back to, well, the early 19th century. So tell us about this Bible.
Well, it is a London Lead Company Bible. The London Lead Company was the biggest employer of lead miners.
And what's the link between the Lead Company and here in Newbiggin in Teesdale?
Well, several of the lead miners lived in Upper Teesdale and Newbiggin, and 4 of them were signatories of the 1759 deed for the purchase of land to erect the meeting house, as they called it. So 3 of Wesley's preachers, 4 lead miners, bought a piece of land for £5 from Robert Robinson, on which to build this meeting house.
Tell me, £5 sounds easy to say, but it still was a significant amount of money in
Oh
those.
yes, it was a lot of money in those days, and they would have to sacrifice in order to buy the stone, and they built the chapel themselves from 1759 until the chapel was opened in 1760.
So tell me, a chapel of this kind, why was it necessary for them to have a chapel? There are plenty of churches around, so why have a chapel?
Well, they had responded to John Wesley's preachers, and they were not happy in the Anglican Church, and in fact there was opposition to them by the rector of Middleton, and the Duke of Cleveland turned 1 or 2 people off their farms because they were following the Methodist way.
So commitment to Christ meant in those days for some people that they might lose their living.
Absolutely. But they responded by building the chapel.
Now, why is it so important that this chapel remains open?
Oh, because it is the oldest in the world in continuous use. The one in Weardale is in continuous weekly use, but it's a year younger than us.
It's very important to keep that claim, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes.
I understand that.
Yes.
So tell us why then, when John Wesley travelled, lots of these places that perhaps to us seem out of the way, they were not quite so out of the way in those days. It was a different kind of landscape, wasn't it, across England?
Oh, yes, and he travelled by horseback, and he kept a diary, of course, in which he wrote what he'd done and where he'd been. And he came here for the last time in 1784, and he was very tired, but he rested, and then he preached without difficulty.
And behind us, not too far away, is a pulpit that John Wesley actually preached from.
Yes, we're very pleased to have this pulpit. It was taken out and stored further down the valley, but then it's been brought back again. And when we have visiting preachers, we often ask them to stand in the pulpit and be photographed.
It's a small world, but the world of John Wesley was not linked just in huge cathedrals, but in these preaching houses, built in significant places. This would be an ideal place to stop, wouldn't it?
Oh, yes. His headquarters was in Newcastle, but he travelled a lot. And this would be a little place where he could stop, stable his horse, come into the chapel and preach in the pulpit.
And the preaching of the gospel, I mean, in these days, so often the things that John Wesley stood for are often marginalised by people, but that message is still significant and important, isn't it?
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes. And he believed that everybody could experience salvation. And that was a wonderful concept that he had.
And perhaps it was, although we sing about it, the Charles Wesley's hymns pick it up, it was for some people a new message.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Do you think it was important for lead miners to hear that, and people who worked on the land, or people who worked in jobs that perhaps sometimes cut them off from established religion?
Oh yes, I think so. They were very poor, and quite often they had to be away from their homes from Monday to Friday, and their life was really quite hard. And so this was a good message of salvation and freedom and a kind of new dignity that they had, because they were Christians, ultimately Methodists.
Mary, for you, you've been involved in the restoration of this chapel.
Yeah.
And tell me, how important to you personally has it meant for you to be part of that story?
Oh, tremendously important. Yes, it has been a great source of interest to me and a great source of friendship with people, both from this country and from other countries. We've links with America, and we've got a link with Australia. All the events have been great for me.
Well, it's a privilege for us to be able to talk in this particular setting here, and to know that the gospel that went all around the world was preached in its simplicity,
Yes.
in its power, and in its life-changing message by John Wesley himself in this place.
Oh, yes. We're very happy that John Wesley himself visited and stood in that pulpit. You know, it's a great joy to us. And it's a great joy to many people who come and who want to stand in the pulpit where John preached.
Mary, it's a delight to talk to you and to feel the sense of joy that you feel about that transforming message of Jesus Christ.
I do. Thank you.